The letter arrived at 9 in the morning, just as it always did, and by noon Rosalind Blackwell's life no longer belonged to her. She was sitting at the small breakfast table in her aunt's townhouse on Beacon Hill, the winter light pale against the windows, when Martha laid the post beside her teacup. Rosalind barely glanced at it. She was counting numbers in a ledger, neat columns that never seemed to add up the way she needed them to. "Bills," her Aunt Philippa said lightly from across the table, breaking toast into careful pieces for her elderly spaniel. "Bills and more bills. I swear the mail used to bring better news when I was young." Rosalind opened the first envelope with a butter knife. A dressmaker's account, smaller than expected. She relaxed slightly. The second was an invitation to a charity musicale in Boston. She set it aside without comment. The third made her pause. The seal was heavy, formal. The name was written in a stranger's hand. Miss Rosalind Blackwell, care of Mrs. Beller. Philippa Thorne, Beacon Hill, Boston. "I don't recognize the firm," Philippa said, peering over her spectacles. "Perhaps a rich cousin has died and remembered us at last." Rosalind smiled faintly and broke the seal. By the time she finished reading, the room felt colder. "Rosalind?" Philippa's voice sharpened. "What is it?" "I don't understand it," Rosalind said slowly. She read the letter again, hoping the words would change. They did not. "It's from a firm of solicitors, Hartley & Sons. They represent the Duke of Thornfield." Philippa blinked. "A duke? Why would a duke write to you?" "I don't know," Rosalind said. Her hand trembled as she set the letter down. "But they say my father entered a contract before he died. A legal obligation. One that concerns my person and my future." Philippa stood and came around the table, her face draining of color as she read over Rosalind's shoulder. "Oh," she whispered. "Oh, no. What do you know?" Rosalind turned to her. "Aunt Philippa, what did my father do?" Tears filled Philippa's eyes. He was worried. "About money. He said some investments had failed. He asked me to sign papers. He said they were only formalities. I didn't read them. I trusted him." The cold settled fully in Rosalind's chest. The next morning she walked into the offices of Hartley & Sons with her spine straight and her hands steady. Whatever awaited her, she would meet it awake. The solicitor, Mr. Adrius. Harold Hartley was courteous and precise. "There exists a betrothal contract," he said, laying the papers before her. "Signed 5 years ago by your father and the late Duke of Thornfield. It binds you in marriage to the current Duke." Rosalind stared at him. "That is impossible." "It is quite legal," he replied. "Your father incurred substantial debts. The late Duke settled them. In return, your hand was pledged. My consent was never given. It was not required." The word struck like a blow. "If I refuse?" she asked. Mr. Hartley hesitated. "Then the full sum must be repaid." "With interest. Approximately $12,000. Your aunt would also be held liable." Rosalind closed her eyes. By afternoon, the Duke arrived. Sebastian Ashworth entered her aunt's parlor as though the room itself bent around him. He was tall, dark-haired, and cold-eyed, his presence filling the space without effort. "Miss Blackwell," he said. "Thank you for seeing me. I didn't have a choice," she replied. Something flickered in his gaze. "The contract exists," he said evenly. "Neither of us created it. Neither of us can ignore it." "You expect me to marry you," Rosalind said. "I expect," he corrected, "to discuss it." They faced each other across the room, two strangers bound by ink and desperation. "I am not your fiancé," Rosalind said clearly. The Duke's mouth curved into the faintest smile. "You are now," he replied. The contract was already signed. The silence that followed was heavy with things neither of them yet understood. And that was how the bargain began. The carriage rolled through the iron gates of Thornfield Park just before sunset, its wheels crunching over the gravel drive like a warning Rosalind could not escape. She sat stiffly inside, her gloved hands folded in her lap, her face calm by effort alone. Across from her, Aunt Philippa dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief torn between guilt and awe. "My dear," Philippa whispered, "it looks like a palace." Rosalind did not answer. The house rose ahead of them, all stone and shadow, too large, too solid, as if it had been standing there long before she was born and would remain long after she was gone. It did not feel welcoming. It felt permanent. Sebastian was waiting when they arrived. He stood on the front steps, coat perfectly cut, posture rigid, every inch the Duke of Thornfield. When his eyes met Rosalind's, something unreadable passed through them. He inclined his head. "Miss Blackwell, Mrs. Thorne, welcome." Inside, servants moved with quiet efficiency. Rosalind was shown to her rooms, just as promised. They were comfortable, elegant, and unmistakably not hers. She tested the lock on the door once, then sat on the edge of the bed and let out a breath she felt she had been holding for days. That evening, dinner was formal and restrained. The long table felt like a distance rather than a setting. Sebastian spoke politely, asking about her journey, her comfort, nothing more. Finally, Rosalind set down her fork. "You said this was to be a trial," she said. 6 weeks to decide whether we can endure each other." Sebastian looked at her steadily. "Not endure. Understand." "Then let us not pretend," she replied. "I did not come here because I wished to. I came because refusal would ruin my aunt. And I did not seek you out," he said quietly. "I discovered a contract that tied my life to yours." They regarded one another in silence. "Very well," Rosalind said. "Let us understand each other honestly, then." The days that followed were not what Rosalind expected. Sebastian did not command her time. He did not demand her attention. Instead, he gave her space, perhaps too much. They crossed paths in hallways and gardens, exchanged measured words, careful glances. It was his brother Marcus who broke the tension. "You're reading Homer," Marcus said cheerfully, dropping into a chair beside her in the library. "Sebastian was afraid you'd be ornamental." "I fail spectacularly at ornament," Rosalind replied. Marcus laughed. "Good. He needs someone who doesn't bow." Slowly, things shifted. They walked together in the gardens. They argued about books and duty and whether a life could be built on obligation alone. Sebastian listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, it was thoughtful, precise, sometimes edged with bitterness. "I was engaged once," he said one afternoon without looking at her. "She wanted my title. I wanted to believe she wanted me." Rosalind said nothing, but she understood. Weeks passed. The formality softened. The silences grew easier. Laughter appeared, cautious at first, then unexpected and real. And Rosalind found herself doing the one thing she had sworn she would not. She began to care. She saw the man beneath the title, the boy shaped by loss, the Duke burdened by expectation, and Sebastian saw her not as a contract, but as a woman who challenged him, who did not flatter, who would rather argue than submit. By the 4th week, the truth was unavoidable. They were no longer strangers. They were standing by the lake when Sebastian spoke again. "I can void the contract," he said, "at the end of 6 weeks. Pay the penalty, set you free." Rosalind's heart tightened. "And would you?" "Yes," he said. "If you wished it." She turned to him then, searching his face. "And what do you wish?" He did not answer at once. "I wish," he said finally, "that this choice were not tainted by paper and debt." "So do I," she said softly. That night, Rosalind realized the danger. She was falling in love. The 5th week brought trouble. Lady Constance Beckford arrived unannounced, beauty sharp as a blade, eyes calculating. She spoke sweetly and struck hard. "You must understand," she said to Rosalind with a smile, "society is cruel to women who rise by transaction." Rosalind met her gaze. Then society must learn to be disappointed. The warning came in a letter the next morning. Accusations, threats, hints of scandal tied to her father's debts. Rosalind showed it to Sebastian. He believed her without hesitation. "I will handle this," he said. But the attack came faster than either expected. Jewels were found in Rosalind's room. Constables arrived. Lady Constance, the accused. Evidence glittered and condemned. Sebastian's face went pale. Rosalind was taken away. And for the first time since they met, doubt flickered in his eyes. As the carriage door closed, Rosalind felt something worse than fear. She felt her heart breaking. Because she did not know if love, once tested, would survive. And she did not know if the Duke would choose trust or retreat back into the cold. The cell was small, cold, and smelled of damp stone and old fear. Rosalind sat on a narrow bench, her hands folded in her lap, her back straight out of habit more than strength. The iron door had closed hours ago, yet the sound still echoed in her ears. She had been questioned twice. Each time she gave the same answer. "I did not steal the jewels," the men wrote. They nodded. They did not believe her. What hurt most was not the arrest. It was the memory of Sebastian's face when the box was opened. The pause. The flicker. The doubt he tried and failed to hide. She had trusted him. Completely. Now she waited to learn if that trust had been foolish. The hours passed slowly. Light faded from the small window high in the wall. Rosalind told herself she would not cry. She had survived worse than humiliation. She had survived being sold by contract. She would survive this. Still, her chest ached. When the door finally opened, she expected another constable. Instead, Marcus Ashworth stepped inside. "Rosalind," he said softly. "Thank God." She stood. "Where is your brother?" Marcus hesitated. That hesitation told her everything. He believes her. Rosalind said quietly. "No," Marcus said quickly. "Not exactly. He believes you. But he is afraid of being wrong again. He is tearing the world apart looking for proof." She closed her eyes. "I asked him to trust me," she said. "Not investigate, not verify. Trust." Marcus nodded. "I know, and he knows he failed you." The door opened again. Sebastian stood there. He looked nothing like a duke. His coat was wrinkled. His face was drawn. There were dark shadows beneath his eyes, and his hands trembled as he stepped forward. "Rosalind," he said. She did not move. "They withdrew the charge," he continued. The servant confessed. Constance paid him to plant the jewels. The magistrate dismissed everything. "I see," she said. "I came as soon as I could." "You came after," she corrected. "After you proved I was innocent." The words landed hard. Sebastian swallowed. "I was wrong. Yes, I doubted," he said hoarsely. "For a moment. And that moment cost me everything." She looked at him then. Really looked. "I was alone in this place," she said, "and the man I loved was not beside me." "I know," he said, "and I will regret it for the rest of my life." Silence filled the small room. "I love you," Sebastian said finally. "But love is not enough if I cannot trust. And trust is not enough if it must be earned again and again," Rosalind replied. She walked past him toward the door. "Rosalind, wait." She stopped but did not turn. "I am setting you free," he said. "The contract will be voided. Tonight, you can return to Boston. You will never hear my name again if that is what you want." Her hand tightened on the doorframe. "And what do you want?" she asked. "I want to be better than the man who failed you," he said, "even if it costs me you." She turned then, tears finally breaking free. "That is the first honest thing you've said since this began." He stepped closer. "Then, let me say, one more. Stay. Not because of the contract. Not because of obligation. Stay because you choose me. She searched his face, seeing the fear there, naked and real. You do not get to ask that, she said softly. Not yet. She left without looking back. Rosalind returned to her aunt's home 2 days later. Philippa wept with relief. The house felt small and familiar, and for the first time Rosalind understood what safety truly was. A letter arrived the next morning. The contract had been destroyed. No demands. No conditions. Just one line at the end, written in Sebastian's own hand. I will not ask again, but I will wait. Days passed. Rosalind tried to resume her old life. She walked the same streets, read the same books, counted the same accounts. Everything felt hollow. She thought of Sebastian alone in that great house, thought of the way he had listened to her, challenged her, loved her in the quiet ways that mattered. And she thought of the cell, of how fear had exposed the cracks in them both. A week later, another letter came. Not from Sebastian. From Lady Constance. You may have won this round, but he will always doubt. Men like him always do. Rosalind folded the letter and burned it. That night she made her decision. She returned to Thornfield Park alone. Sebastian was in the library when she entered, standing before the fireplace as if he had never moved since she left. When he saw her, all color drained from his face. You shouldn't be here, he said. I know, she replied. But I am. He did not approach her. If you came because you feel sorry for me, please leave. I came because I am angry, she said. Because I love you, because I refuse to let fear decide my life. His breath caught. I will not marry a man who doubts me, she continued. But I will marry a man who learns. She stepped closer. I am not innocent of fear either. I ran because I was hurt. Because it was easier than staying. She stopped before him. So this is my choice, she said. I choose you. Not the Duke. Not the contract. You. But if you ever doubt me again, I will leave, and I will never return. Sebastian dropped to his knees, not out of pride, out of desperation. I swear it, he said, on my name, on my life. I will trust you even when fear tells me not to. She took his hands. Then stand up, she said gently. I will not marry a man on his knees. He rose, tears in his eyes. They married quietly 1 month later. No society. No spectacle. Just vows spoken with shaking voices in the small chapel on the estate. The contract was burned in the garden after. Years passed. Love proved stronger than fear. Sebastian learned to trust without proof. Rosalind learned that courage sometimes meant staying. And when their children played beneath the roses, Rosalind would smile and remember the words that once bound her against her will. You are now. This time it was true, and this time it was her choice.